Morning, everyone, and welcome back. Yes, it's Tuesday. A big sponsor shout out goes to our two podcast friends and sponsors. The Australian Sewing Guild, who has been our Monday Daily Series regular, is now a sponsor of Sew Organised Style podcast. Go to ozsew.org to check out the online workshops, sew-alongs, skills library, and more. Our second sponsor is Tatiana's School of Couture as she launches it online. Go to her website to see her new online sewing classes and patterns. Tuesday is Sewcialists Tuesday, so let's give a warm welcome to the Australian editor, Chloe Reid.
Hi Maria, hi everyone.
Hi Chloe, good to see you again.
You too. How was your week?
Pretty good. Yep.
Good.
Got a bit of sewing done, and yourself?
Yeah, the same. We've booked a skiing trip, so I started planning what I might need to sew for that, which is a bit exciting.
It is. It's actually exciting that we can plan things at the moment.
Starting to change. It's good.
It is. So where are we going to start from today? Because it's kind of a big week in a way.
It is a huge week. Where are we going to start? I don't know. So May ended, and our May thing ended, our May month. And so the one thing that we've got left over from our May We Remind You month is the TNT poll. We're going to leave that open just for a bit. And so if people want to fill that in, we'll do a post to wrap up those probably in about a week, just to give people time. And then coming out of, it's always a bit odd when we come out of a theme month, because we're always like, now what do we do for a bit? And there's usually a mini challenge brewing in our minds, but not yet firmed up. And so often the next few weeks will be filled with a range of posts that, are who we are, call outs, that we've finally got all the things together, often an interview, that kind of thing. And then recent events made us reflect on that and whether we could do something a little bit differently and what it is that we should or shouldn't do as a sewing blog about events that are happening in America, but actually events that happen in many places in the world. So, as you know, I'm Australian, and this week is Reconciliation Week, which is a week where we remember both the past injustices that have been perpetuated on our First Nations people, our Indigenous people, our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, and then also we seek to redress the balance because there's a legacy of higher rates of incarceration, of poorer health outcomes, of lower rates of education, of actually lower life expectancy for Aboriginal people in Australia. And so given that and everything else, we posted some things this week that were about incidents that had cropped up that happened in a park in America with a woman who was threatening to call the police and being very clear that she was calling the police about an African-American man, and then the death of George Floyd in the police case that was caught on video, which has now sparks of civil unrest and all sorts of pretty terrifying things in the States. The contrast between, I don't know if you saw the protesters with weapons who stormed one of the state capitol buildings without lockdown for COVID, and the contrast between kind of heavily armed people forcing their way into a government building and how the police and other authorities have dealt with that versus largely people of colour, though lots of different people protesting, again, what seems to be largely peacefully, has just, I don't know, I guess lots of people are reflecting on this. And so right at the time that all this emerged, we posted about some of it, and we did that for a couple of reasons, and we got some comments that were kind of like, well, aren't you a sewing blog? This, or not quite, this has nothing to do with you, but I'm a sewing blog. And I think the reason that we can't, there are two reasons really that we can't just kind of carry on posting just things about, how do I sew buttonholes in a period like this? So one is that Sewcialists has always been very much about the voices of the sewing community, and particularly diversity of those voices.
Yeah.
And so if you're part of a community, the problems of a community are your problems, right? Like that's a kind of rule of community, is you share the burdens of things and the benefits of things, actually. And so for us, not to acknowledge the kind of massive turmoil and actually day-to-day difficulty that a whole portion of our community experiences was just too difficult. And then the second reason is that day-to-day aspect and the personal aspect of it, which is that there are people who write for us or follow us or like our posts or engage with us as part of our community who don't feel like they can go out at night running, or who worry about their sons and daughters all the time in a way that many of us don't have to, right?
Exactly.
And so, that's the reason we did that. And it sparked some debate, as it should, and we were trying to walk a kind of fine line of making sure that we don't step away from difficult debate, that we also have a conversation in a way that is a conversation. And so what we've decided to do from here, I think, is to spend at least the next few weeks, and also to revisit this topic later. We're going to repost some of the posts that we've had previously that deal with this subject, or that are kind of from people of colour who've written for us. And we're also hoping that a couple of people will write some kind of new posts for us on that too. So you'll see those come out this week. And one of the people that we talked to on whether we could repost their post, said, absolutely fine, but can you also talk about this later? Like, can you talk about this when people like me don't know George Floyd's name anymore because it's somebody else who wasn't caught on camera, like, as a way of saying this problem doesn't go away, actually, unless something fundamental changes. And so we should have the discussion when the world is on fire, literally, but we should also have the discussion when it's not, and work out what that means for us. So the other nice thing I thought was Gillian posted a couple of things that were about courses, free online courses, that Coursera thing, which is like massive online courses.
Yes, yeah.
The courses are free, and if you want a certificate, you pay, but if you don't care about the kind of certificate of qualification, the course is free. And there are a number that were on cultural competence, cultural awareness. So there was one on Aboriginal people in Australia. There was one she posted, I think, about Canadian First Nations people, as a way of saying, yes, you can lend your voice, yes, you can be a positive ally, but you can also go educate yourself. And so we've also posted some resources people can look at on Instagram too.
That's great. I saw the book references, and I tried to find them locally, which they weren't available, but I think I'll go to those resources that Gillian's put up there just to be a bit more informed.
Yeah. And for you and I guess those books are good generically, but there are also books written with an Aboriginal perspective that might be good for us too.
Exactly. Yep. Great.
So that's the biggest week. And I guess I would say, I'm not sure where your audience is from, but that our thoughts and support are with people, particularly in America, who might be quite frightened by events recently, or just in their day-to-day lives actually might be experiencing this sort of racism and
the unrest.
Unrest, but also just fear in kind of, if I get pulled over, will this become something, which must be pretty scary all around. And so then the other topic that is close to our hearts is, well, two things actually. One is we've got a post that will have just gone out actually by the time we air, that is about the Fat Sewing Club, and that's a new group that's formed, social group with a website and all sorts of things, so you can find details of that in the post, and we might talk more about that next week.
That'd be good.
Once our thoughts are gathered. And then the last thing is it's also Pride Month. There are a number of people, I think, doing sewing activities and specific sewing for Pride Month and that kind of thing. So we'll be also featuring some of that content. So not much for people to digest in the coming weeks.
Sewcialists are a very inclusive group, and just talking about those issues today illustrates that.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, for us, the reason that we're going to repost some posts by others is that it's not really about us. And so we're really conscious that we exist as a voice for people who don't have a strong voice in the sewing community. And so if there are people who want to write for us on that basis, they're more than welcome to get in touch. And we'll probably we'll put a thing out on Instagram this week sort of asking people about that. So if anybody listening feels like they also have a post to contribute, that would be great.
Yep, listeners, look out for that post, and we'll have links on the podcast website for that as well. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Chloe.
No problem. Obviously, that's been a pretty big week and we've got lots of stuff coming up. But I also did want to flag that we've got Charlotte on Instagram this week. And one of the things she was talking about in our Instagram stories was the Sewing Weekender.
She did. And Sewing Weekender is something that you can go to in the UK, or if you get yourself to the UK over the weekend on the 13th and 14th of June, I think it is.
Yep.
However, at the moment, they can't do that on the ground, but they can do it virtually.
It's pretty exciting.
So when Charlotte was talking about it, I thought, oh, that means that we don't actually have to get on a plane and get over there. We can actually participate from wherever we are in the globe.
That's great. So you're going to attend?
I've already booked in.
That's excellent. So we're looking forward then for you to talk about the Sewing Weekender in our Tuesday post on, what will it be, the 16th?
Yeah, something like that. But it's going to be really interesting because she did say that they will be doing a lot of things during the UK time, like British Standard Time,
Yeah.
but there'll be a lot of resources and workshops that you can look at outside of those times. So I thought, I think this would be fun.
Great. Nice to have something like that. That's a bit different, breaks things up.
It does.
Even for us, where we're starting to be able to kind of travel around, within the state a little bit and things, it's going to be a while, I think, before there's anything like that where people are kind of confident to organise it. So like virtual cocktails, but more intense.
And look, I think if you haven't been to a sewing weekender and you're from a different country, it's going to be really interesting to see who they have that are running these workshops that we don't have access to. So I'm actually looking forward to the learning side of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really important thing. Every now and again, I follow the kind of rabbit hole of somebody's blog recommending something, and I find there's a bunch of European pattern companies, for example, that I kind of hear of only through that route because they're not as popular in Australia or maybe the States as they would be back in the UK. So it's interesting how there's little microcosms of different expertise, different things that people do, different ways they sew, different pattern companies. And of course, having made a few UK patterns recently, they use centimetres.
Isn't that good?
Well, you see, I don't know about that because I grew up in the UK, obviously, so I'm used to the metric system. And Australia actually technically has the metric system. But because I was a quilter, like I started sewing as a quilter, everything in quilting is in inches. And so everything in my normal life is in the metric system, but sewing is always in inches. And so I find it really hard when somebody gives me centimetres for seam allowances because my brain just hasn't quite worked it out yet.
So in a way you're ambidextrous? No.
Yeah, not really.
All right.
I think I'm left-handed when it comes to sewing and right-handed in normal life. Every ruler I have pretty much is in inches, I just, it's a whole different ballgame.
Okay. There you go. Listeners, you've learned something new.
You might come back from the sewing weekend and being able to sew in centimetres as well.
Thanks, Chloe, for coming on to Sew Organised Style Daily Podcast, because Tuesday is always about Sewcialists. No matter what the topic, it's about Sewcialists and what you guys are doing.
Thank you for having me. I hope everybody has a good week and we'll see you next week.
Yep. See you next week, everyone. Bye.
Bye.